Dan's got the microphone.
That it doesn't matter why a person is in the situation they're in. If there's a need, we should fill it because Jesus didn't ask for it.
Who cares why they're in need, right? Yeah, let's go along on that. Yeah, okay.
That at the end of the day, your presence, even if there's not a darn thing you can do in that situation, that it's beyond your power, beyond anything you could ever do for that individual, the fact that you're there, that's one of the things that might be most powerful in impacting for that individual.
Okay. Can the church just show up first? All right, great. Who else? Yeah.
Mobilization is hard to get started, but it's harder to restart, and it's easier to keep going. And we're talking about just the idea of, to get a car going, yeah, that's going to take a lot of work to mobilize people. But left unattended, when you're not continuing the momentum, when that constant discipleship isn't going, then the car stops again. Now you got 5 cars that are stopped. Now you got to get 5 cars going again. It's easier to keep the mobilization going. Just in the video, we saw she was with him. His car was going. He was mobilized personally. He was going to go whether or not somebody was there or not, but he was bringing people along. And that gets their momentum going. But I think what happens, we even talk this over analysis. I don't know if I can do this, but just start. The crawl, walk, run. Come and see. You don't have to know how to do this. Come, just watch. And then the gifts raise up out of their life. Their heart is broken, or something that's identified in that moment of mobilization. Once they get moving, and out of that identification, direction can come. And so yeah.
Great. The power of showing up. Yep. Back to that.
I think for us, we talked about if the goal is every member on mission. The challenge is then allowing the members to have the freedom to mobilize on their passion, but when they want the whole church to be involved in what they're doing, and so trying to keep casting that goal for us as a church is every member on mission. Hey, go ahead, do what you want to do, but that doesn't mean that every member has your passion. So we were just talking about how difficult that can be.
Awesome. We call them crazies. If you're a person that has a passion for orphans, doesn't think that's the most important thing for everybody, you got the wrong person. So you got a whole bunch of people like, everybody has to do this. Like, oh, that's the right person. Cool. Yeah, doesn't make it easy, but yeah. Good, thank you. Anybody else? Back to that.
It's time for the church to be the church. And I think we don't show up because we think we have to show up with something big. And we were discussing that the small acts, the small gestures will change the whole thing. The church can show up just to be there. Let the Lord do the rest.
We think that we all share one mission, and it's God's mission, right? But we are all different, so it's creating opportunities that the church can give to the members. So according to their abilities and strengths, so they can choose what they really want. But it's not, as you said before, that it's recruiting. It's just like inviting them, make them think that it's something that like a unique experience that they can have.
All right, so That video was done about 7 years ago. And I'm going to show you another video a little bit later that was done a year ago. Because that's the starting point of mobilization. But it's not the ending point, is it? Here's what I love about the church. So we don't just show up. That's what he talked about, was show up. That's kind of how we call people into action, is we just come and see. But God never leaves us there, does he? There's that next step that God always ensures, because he breaks our heart, and we're like, I'm gonna walk with this person. Right? I'm gonna get in life with them, and I'm gonna journey in life with them and see where this goes. And while we're in a journey with people that we love and care about, inevitably people come and say, can I get more training to know what to do? Are there other things to learn? Are there best practices? And guess what? They're there. Almost everything the professional mission world has learned to do, our members can learn to do. There's a few things we kind of avoid. Brain surgery, Bible translation, some of those things. So it's incredible what members learn to do. And we'll be talking about that as we get into what we do in step 3. But I want you to think about mobilization is about relationships. It's about relationships. So never forget that mission is more about relationships than resources. The minute you make mission about resources, you damage relationships. Not intentionally, not permanently, but think about a young couple who start dating. Okay, think back to your teenage years, or teenagers you've had as a parent, and when resources became the primary point in the relationship. Doesn't look pretty, does it? All right. So think about healthy relationships are central to mission. I love it when Peter was approached and they looked to this person in need and said, silver or gold have I none, but such as I have given. God's put something in my hand. It's not resources. It's relationship. It's the power of God. It's prayer. It's all these things. So that's why we show this first. We'll get to resource stuff later, but it doesn't come first. The fastest way to demobilize a church is to go in, whether it's your own church or other churches, and start to bring a lot of resources, because that tells everybody without resources, I'm out of the game. I'm out. Especially overseas. Oops, it takes a lot of education, it takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of stuff. I'm out. You fund them, they'll do it. I'm good. You pay them. Done. You just demobilized the church, and it's a little bit like pouring a lot of fertilizer on a lawn. What happens when you over-fertilize a lawn? You burn it. You've over-resourced it. And it takes a generation of grass to be able to come back and restart it. So there's places around the world that are kind of mission welfare societies. We've over-resourced them, and the people basically there in the country, in that community say, hey, unless somebody comes and pays for this, nothing's going to get done. All right. So mobilization is critical. A disciple-making process is the foundation, critical. Mobilization is about relationships, critical. Then we can kind of go talk about what's going to happen in the community. Now, I just want you to understand, it's okay when people come to you in church and say, I've got this great idea. What if we paid for X? What if we went and did X? And they always start with what we can do out there. And there's a lot of great heart, a lot of great passion. And you don't want to stifle that, do you? No. You put your arm around them and go, I love your heart. You're awesome. Can you come to the next peace training so we can figure this out together? Meanwhile, keep going. Don't take stuff yet. Just keep your relationship going, whether it's, young 12, 13-year-old being trafficked. Keep those relationships, but don't jump in and try to be the rescuer. Does that make sense? So foundation first, mobilization second. Mobilization is about relationship. All right. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay to ask questions. Okay to disagree. All right. So peace leaders in the next 2 days, we're going to spend 4 hours on that. Then you go back and answer questions that you're going to get asked like I got asked. All right. Let's go to step 3, transformation. Step 1, foundation. It's a disciple-making process, Great Commandment, Great Commission, every member on mission, where in Acts 1:8. Step 2, mobilization, crawl, walk, run, come and see, come and walk with me, come and die, take the sacrificial step. Now we can go, the first 2 steps are in the church, right? In the church, first 2 steps, that's church development. How many of you went to Bible school or seminary? Okay, how many of you had a church development class in Bible school or seminary? Okay, most don't around the world. So what do when they don't know how to develop a healthy church? They make it up. They make it up. And usually it's kind of a smorgasbord plan. It's program driven. If I have some worship stuff, I have some fellowship stuff, I have some discipleship stuff, that's going to all work out really well. So that's why it's important to give people training on how to do that. Now, when you step out of the church and you go out of the community, the next 2 steps are in the community, and it's about community development. Now, same people, how many of you have had training in community development? Okay, most of you. Pastors don't get trained in community development, and yet they're the first ones to ask for people to come into the community and help them do work in the community. And they're usually not asking, they're not usually saying, can you come and train us in community development? That's not what they usually ask. At least that's not what they ask me. They say, can you come into the community and do this? I'm like, oh, interesting. Where did that come from? Like, what's your thought behind it? Well, I just think that'd be a great idea. Well, my 12-year-old had a lot of great ideas too. So let's talk about what this looks like biblically and what we can do to really help make this happen in a way that transforms as many lives as possible. So on page 14, it says step 3, transformation. It's a Jesus model. It's for the lost and least of these. In Luke 10, the whole book of Luke, or the whole chapter 10 of Luke, are principles of how to go into a community and begin to connect with people and see lives transformed. I'm just going to go to these first couple verses, then we're not going to go through all the 18 principles, but it's when Jesus appointed 72 and sent them 2 by 2 to every town and place where he was about to go. He told them the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. So he gives us a great mobilization principle. Ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers. So he tells us to, first of all, pray. And guess what happens when you turn to God and pray that he would send others? What happens? God says to me, hey, Mike, what are you doing? So be careful what you pray for. God, please send people to help with whatever. God says, Mike, what are you doing? So then come and see, right? I go, I bring others with me. That's why I get more people praying. It's like, then he tells them that. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay. Now, in Luke chapter 10, the first thing that comes up is Jesus tells the 72, look for a personal peace. Now, in every community, there are people that open doors. They're there. How do you know they're there? Because God told you they're there. Because he said, look for one. Find somebody that's kind of the key to knowing that particular people, that particular community. Almost always there's somebody who knows more than what you know as you go out. Whether it's when we started our thing on justice and trafficking, we were doing stuff on all kinds of issues of justice regarding human trafficking. And we just went out to learn from as many people as we could. And we've done that on everything. Who can we learn from? Who's out there? Who opens doors? So we look for people of peace. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. And then we're committed to something that lasts. So in John 15, 8 and 16, the Bible talks about fruitfulness. Now, I think I've come up with now about 7 different definitions that people use in work of compassionate justice, in community development. It became popular about a decade ago to use the word sustainable. So everybody came up with their own definition of sustainable, even if they weren't. Have you seen that before? You should partner, so they come up with a new definition of partner. You should do sustainable work, they do that. You should work with the church, they do that. They talk about all those things. Well, the Bible tells us what sustainable is and what reproducible is. Now, the reason why the Bible talks about these is because it cares about more and more people. Right? The kingdom is doing what? It's expanding. That means when it gets started, it continues. And it's expanding, meaning it's reproducing. And the Bible calls that fruitfulness. So we're going to do a quick test on biology. What is fruit? Not the Bible spiritual characteristic, but what is fruit? What's an apple, an orange? What is it? It's a seed. It's a seed. What's a seed meant to do?
Die.
Plant die. True. Do you see what's come up with the first answer?
That's great.
Yeah, it's meant to reproduce. Meant to reproduce. Okay? So we're told to bear fruit. So it reproduces of a like kind, and it's to bear fruit that remains. What does that mean? It's sustainable. It's going to be there long term. It's going to be there long term. And so we're always looking for ways to do work that remains and multiplies. Why? Because there's more people that need help. How many orphans are there in the world? Roughly? A lot. Get it?
A whole lot.
163 million? Is that right? Rough idea? 163 million. Now, I'm all for the metaphor that the person walking along the beach and they see all these starfish that are up on the land that are going to drown if you don't throw them back in, and they throw one back in, and the kind of metaphor is, yay, I threw one back in. And do I agree with, yay, I threw one back in? Do you agree with that? I agree with that. I'm good. I'm like good. Now, what about the other 163 million orphans? Are you okay with that? I'm not. I'm not okay with that. Getting one orphan adopted, am I okay with that? Yes. Am I okay with just that? No, I'm not. So how can we work in a way that maximizes not just what we do, but what others can learn from us and be passed on from person to person, so that what? Why don't we just eliminate orphans in the world? Why don't we close all the orphanages? Why don't we get them all into permanent families? Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Is that easy? No. But why do we start to think that way? Why don't we eliminate AIDS? Why don't we? Does God want AIDS around? I don't think so. Can we get to 0 new infections? Can we get to 0 premature deaths from HIV positive? Can we get to zero babies born with HIV? I think so. We might as well go for it. Is our God big?
Yes.
Is he big or what? So, come on. All right. 2.2 billion followers of Christ. That's quite an army that can be raised up. So let's give them some practices that are sustainable and reproducible. Okay? Our church, any other church. So that's kind of where we come at this. We come at this as though, can somebody in personal peace, through a lifestyle of caring about others, throw the 1-star fish back in? Yes. Is that a good thing? Yes. Should we cheer that on? Yes. Do we leave it at that? No. See the difference? Okay, so I don't want people to think that, Mike just hates people that do the one kind thing. I don't. I love acts of kindness. Every day. Every day. All right. So here's how we approach it. I'm gonna do 2 things. I'm going to talk about PEACE. Here's where we kind of put our construct in for where the hooks are that our members can get started with. Remember, crawl, walk around. Here's the hooks. You see this on page 14. P, plant truth to promote reconciliation. We put evangelistic outreach there. We put justice and trafficking there. We put church planting there. By the way, church planting, when we talk about church planting, we talk about starting groups. Now, if you want to plant churches that have a building and pastor, amen, go for it, in favor of it. Most members are not interested in figuring out how to do the building, the pastor, but can they start groups? Yes. I suppose your churches are similar. We have a lot of groups here, small groups. What I love about Saddleback is when Rick came up with the idea of HOST. Well, you could be a host. Have you all heard this before? Most of you have. Okay, if you have a heart for people, you open your home, you serve coffee or tea, and turn on the DVD, you can have a group in your home. 3,000 people said yes in 1 week in this Saddleback. And they had to figure out who wasn't a believer yet, how many people weren't married, were living together. Would you rather sort that out, though? Hey, we'll sort that out any day of the week to get 3,000 people say, I'll be a host. We still have some people that sign up to be a host that aren't believers, and now we actually let them lead the group while we're trying to lead them to Christ. That's a small group team's problem. All right, for me, I'm a missions guy. You want to know the best church planting in the world? It's starting groups. It's starting groups that multiply. Hey, you're in a group? Start a group. You're not in a group? Get in a group. You're in a group? Start another group. You can be in a group, lead a group. It's here over and over. Start groups, start groups, start groups, start groups. Okay. Equip servant leaders, we talk about church health training, peace training, purpose-driven ministries, assist the poor, orphan care, poverty, care for the sick, HIV, AIDS, health care, clean water, educate and exploration, English foreign language literacy. There's blanks under there for fill in the blanks. What else do you have a heart for? Animal husbandry, micro enterprise development, preschools. It's endless. We usually start with core ones at our church so that people can find something easy to get into. Within justice and trafficking, there are 7 causes. So our 7 causes under justice and trafficking relate to widows, at-risk youth, legal aid, all these things. So each of these begin to develop causes. Okay. Now, I'm going to draw something for you. Let's see what we got there. Because one thing that was a challenge is that oh.
There it goes.
Okay. So, when I'm out talking to pastors about purpose-driven, they go, what is it? I say, well, it's about 5 purposes: worship, fellowship, discipling, serving, and evangelism or outreach. A lot of pastors go, oh, I do that. I've got programs for each of those. So same thing happens with peace. PEACE, I've got some things for this, I've got some things for that. I was with Rick on the first trip to Rwanda, Pastor Rick, and we were with a bishop. And he showed us his P projects, his E projects, his A projects, his C projects, his E projects, and said, hey, we're totally doing peace. Where's the money? So then Rick was preaching in one of his parishes. There are 400 members. I'm sitting with the bishop in the back. And no, you don't sit in the back of the bishop. I was in the front with the bishop. So I leaned over to him and I said, Bishop, out of these 400 people, how many are living on mission? And he said, 7. Awesome. What would it take to help all of them live on mission? And his answer was, that would take a lot of money. Right? That's what he thought. So, I've got to. There. Now you don't know my password.
Let's hack now.
Hack away. Do it again. All right. So, his idea was he had funded 7 people to do projects. Well, that's fine. That's good. So he said, so when are you going to bring the stuff? Meaning the money. And I said, okay, well, let's get your people mobilized, doing what they can do, and then we'll talk about that later. We'll talk about that later. So I'm going to show you something here in terms of how we began working to help deal with that. I'm going to draw that up here. You can see this okay? Okay. So I want you to think developmentally. So just think about PEACE 1, 2, 3. If you don't want to have to pay for a master's degree in community development, the next 30 minutes will save you a lot of money. Okay. So the easiest way for me to teach this is to start over in education, because globally, this first number 1 is something called primary level. And think about primary school. What should you know in order to finish primary school? What should you know? How to read, how to write, and how to do arithmetic, right? The 3 R's. Reading, writing, arithmetic. The 3 R's. That's why we're so messed up. As North Americans, you are included in this mess. They're from Canada. We're totally messed up. Okay, so primary school, and in development terminology, this is called literacy. Okay, literacy. Now, let me ask you this. If this is a church, and they care about this community, it's their community, right? They're in this community. And they want to send people to live on mission. How many of the people from this church could be involved in literacy if they had a heart to? How many could be involved? What if they're not literate? They can go through it. You can go through it, or you can teach it. Right? And how much does it cost to do a literacy program?
Not much.
I can take you to places where it didn't cost anything. So suddenly you have a shop here at 100%, living on mission, helping with literacy. Now, is it good to have secondary schools and tertiary schools in the community? Absolutely. Where are the greatest educational needs in developing communities? At the primary level. You know what distinguishes between a developing community and a developed community? Primary level development. If there's huge gaps at primary level development, you have a developing community. They're the least of these. They're the ones who are behind, they're last, they're forgotten. There's gender inequality, usually at that level. It leads to poverty, leads to bad health care. This is where the least of these are affected most. Let's go to care for the sick. I went as a medical missionary. I get to the Philippines. We're doing clinical work, and 70 to 80% of the people are down here at this level. This is where the health problems were. So, not that dumb. We go, let's go to the churches, train the church members in preventative and primary health care for themselves and for the people in their community. 70 to 80% of diseases go away. What's it cost to do preventative and primary health care? Nothing. Who can learn to do it? Anyone. You have to know how to read and write to do it. No. All right, let's go over to assist the poor. How many of you have heard of Mohammed Yunus? He got the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago for economic development for the poor. Everybody thinks that the reason why he got his Nobel Prize was because of the million loans that were given out in microenterprise development, and he was the first to say that was not the reason why the poor were helped. In fact, you never start with microenterprise with the poor. Ever. It's the worst thing you can do for them. What he started with, in Asia it's called self-help groups, in Asia it's usually called more savings groups. Get the people together, about 80% of people in these groups are women. Get them together, they start to save. They start to share the savings with each other to start micro businesses and grow from there. Now, there's different levels of poverty: extreme poverty, moderate poverty, relative poverty. In extreme poverty, most organizations can't work with the extreme poor because there's no return on their investment. They do microloans so they can get back, they can get paid interest, so they can perpetuate their organization and getting out more loans. Praise God for them, they just don't work with extreme poverty. It's okay, love them, not against them, but this is where the work is with extreme poverty. So we were in Delhi, we were working with a church, and we were working in a Muslim village, and not village, a Muslim slum, and we started doing savings groups here. And eventually we found out that they were taking their savings, and the first thing that they were using the savings for was for health issues, for health care. And so people from the church said, well, we're going to go down and help them learn preventative primary health care. And then they realized they're not literate, so some of the people have that came and started teaching them literacy. And then these Muslims are like, why do you care about us? Well, we care about you because Jesus loved us. We do this out of gratitude to him. Well, who's Jesus? Well, your Quran says something about Jesus. And the Quran talks about his book, which is the Bible. We'll teach you the Bible. They became Jesus followers. So there's a new group of believers. Anybody else call it a church? We can call it church. They're just people coming together who are doing savings groups and learning healthcare and learning literacy, and now they know Jesus and they want to know about Jesus. And eventually, this church says, well, the person that should be leading the group is somebody from your group. So suddenly you have a leader from that group. Muslim background. Don't know hardly anything. They make the best group leaders, just like our members. Right? I don't know anything. I just know what this guy taught me, this gal taught me yesterday. Awesome. Teach that. You're in a group, you leave a group. All right, now, I want you to see what just happened. See this primary level development? That's called primary level development. We started off here, did this, different church members doing this stuff. This is called holistic care. Now, why do we use a W for holistic?
This is small.
New Age doesn't use the W. We use the W because we're talking about the whole person, we're talking about the whole family, and we're talking about the whole lifetime. Can you think of one other organism on the planet that God has said should care about the whole person, their body, their soul, their spirit, their finances, their emotional health, their social health, their physical health, their mental health, their whole person, their whole family, kids, grandparents, for their whole lifetime? Is there anybody else called by God to do that? No. Only the church is dumb enough to do that. We're like, we care, whole person, whole family, whole lifetime. We're in it with them for the whole thing. We're in it for the long haul. And they're a little nutty, right? Mike's a little nutty, but Rick's like, okay, I got him, so, you know, he's with us. You know, we don't kick people out of church, do we? I mean, the Bible talks about the people that kick out are the ones who think they're perfect. They have other issues. So here we are caring about this holistic care because we're in a journey of life with them. The reason why this church did holistic care is because when they went into this community, they didn't see the people as a project. They saw them as people. And so they started with what they knew, and they discovered some other things. Oh my gosh, their education is terrible. Let's do something about that. Journeying in life, oh my gosh, they're taking all their savings and putting it into healthcare. We just got to teach them for their healthcare. They want to know about Jesus, we'll tell them about Jesus. And that could get you in a lot of trouble, it could get you killed in that stuff. Well, that's okay, we'll tell them about Jesus. Maybe form a group, let's teach them how to lead. They're still connected to this group. They're still connected relationally. They're still loving them and caring about it. This still goes on. This is called holistic care. This is what the church does. Now, I'm all in favor of organizations that pick one thing to do, but an organization cannot pick all of this to do. The only way to do it is set up this project. There are a lot of different organizations that do these things, but eventually all the organizations go away. Praise God if they start some things, but it's the church that's left behind that will be there forever, that will continue the relationships. Now, keep in mind, everything we talk about is not in competition with anybody else. I'm not disparaging any organization on the planet. Praise God for them. God set them up. I care about mobilizing 2.2, 2.4 billion followers of Christ and getting them in the game, caring like they can care, and being the church. Any other argument about who's what, I don't really care to have that discussion. It's like, does God love Wycliffe? Yes, he does. Did he raise him up for a purpose? Yes, he did. Should more people go be Bible translators? Yes, they should. End of discussion. Now, can we get back to 2.2 billion people? Is that okay to say that? I don't want you to think that for some reason mobilizing your churches is somehow contra to other things that God is doing in other ways to other people. Is that fair enough to say? So I remember I did this with some churches early on, and I started off by saying, how many of your churches have a mission budget? And they all raised their hand. I said, great. Don't change anything. Whatever you're funding, missionaries, projects, keep funding it. I just want to talk about mobilizing your people to do what God wants them to do. Fair enough? So that's where we started. How everything else works out, that's up to God. Okay? Now, these things up here are second and third level development. And these are good things to have in a community. They're very difficult things. Let me get a different color here. They're very difficult things to sustain because it takes money and expertise. Now, if you want to sustain something at secondary, third level, okay, there it is. You need to collaborate. So there is a way to do sustainable work at secondary and third level development. I'm not going to spend time on it today. I want you to know that these are valuable things, they're important things. Usually the way that churches work in this is they collaborate with somebody who's going to fund something long-term. Good example is this. In Africa, 40% of healthcare and 40% of education are considered church-based. What that means is the church provides the space and the government provides the professionals and the tools, whether it's healthcare, medical supplies, or the healthcare worker, or the teachers and the curriculum. So they collaborate with the government and that can be perpetuated on. That's fine. Now, that doesn't mobilize the majority of the people here. And the least of these, the lost and least of these, the greatest percent are down here. Now, I don't want you to think this is just about global. So in Orange County, we're considered a developed community. When you think? Pretty much. Are there gaps? Oh yes, there are. Are there gaps down here? Sure. So let's talk about what some of those gaps might be. What do you think gaps might be in education? What's that?
Third grade reading level.
Third grade reading level? Maybe, okay. Okay. English for immigrants. Right. So the smartest people on the planet come to America and they can't speak English well, and so they can't get good jobs. It's a gap. So we fill it. What else? What other education issues? So if you go 30 minutes up the road, you get to a community called Santa Ana. There's a couple high schools that have over 70% high school dropout rate. That's a gap. Because where do most of those kids end up? Gangs, prostitutes, prison. Sad story. It's a gap, can be covered. Okay, what else? Any other gaps in education we can think of? Okay, adults don't have technology skills to get another job. Okay, good. Great. How about access to higher education? All right. So those are not. What about health care? Care for the sick. Gaps in a community like this? What are the gaps? Any ideas? What's that?
Senior care.
Senior care because? Yes, the costs. Incredible, okay? Even though there's Affordable Care Act, still people without insurance. Think about living with a family and no insurance in today's world. So a whole other gap that existed. What about poverty? You have poverty in your communities? In North America, Latin America, you have poverty? It's everywhere, isn't it? Okay. Job skills. What you were talking about, job skills. Okay, gap. And then we do a whole thing up here. So there's gaps there, okay? So one thing we'll talk about is you enter into a community. One of the first things we'll do is we'll go in and do assessment. You go in and explore the land. And a lot of people go in and do needs assessment. but where you need to start is asset assessment. Where all the other players in the community and what are the great things they're doing, and you can celebrate all the great things that government does, regardless of how big you think the government should be. Other organizations that are out there, foundations that are doing work, just celebrate. It's like, wow, that's awesome. So glad that somebody's doing something for these people. But there are still, now after you've done asset assessment, you go needs assessment, there are still gaps. And there's a lot of primary level gaps that our members can step into. Okay? And you get into a journey of life with these wonderful people that for whatever reason, like we talked about before, doesn't matter how they got there, it just matters that we care. We show up, and guess what? Most of the things that we learn along the way. Because people inform us of kind of where they're at and what their issues are. Okay? Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time kind of unpacking this today. We'll unpack this on Thursday morning for about 4 hours, have more discussion. But let me just stop and ask you, I'm going to have you do a discussion around one thing, but I want to ask you questions related to this before I have you do one exercise. Any questions on this? All right, so I want you at your table to pick one cause. So whether you want to deal with orphans, or HIV/AIDS, or clean water, or literacy, and I want you to think about something that so notice this foundational level of development, but then our initiatives are like this, they're vertical. We consider orphans the most vulnerable on the earth, so we put them over here. You can put them anywhere you want. And so they work vertically on top of this foundation. We'll come to that tomorrow. But pick something and go, what would primary level look like? What would secondary look like? What would tertiary look like? Okay, just to kind of get used to working with this framework. Does that sound okay? Any questions? Okay, somebody at your table, pick one really fast, doesn't matter what it is, and then dive in together. Ready? Go.